Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so excited to have this program today, and I'm so happy that so many of you are here. This is really wonderful. This is kind of like our debut for the villages, and so we've got a great program lined up. I'll be brief here, but I just wanted to say welcome to everybody. This has been a project about 2.5, 3 years in the making, to get from reading requests for proposals into my head, into paper, and then execution. So I'm just so excited. But I'd like to quickly acknowledge a few folks that have been very helpful along the way and instrumental in getting this project going. Joe McDermott, I don't know if you're here. Lon, you're here. So please pass along to Joe how appreciative we are for all of his help. Joe McDermott, for those of you who don't know, is our county council member. Tracy Adair, I know you're here. Tracy oversees this part of the Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy program. She has just an incredible program that she runs, so many of them, and I don't know how she does it with such grace and aplomb, but she does. Keith Pryor, I don't know if you're here or not. Keith has been our data person. He is just an expert at statistics and surveys, and he has led our community assessment, and we are very grateful for that. My board of directors who listened to me talk about this ad nauseum and gave me wonderful feedback and support. I really appreciate that. Liz Ilg, hi, thank you, Liz. She's our board president. She kept me sane during all of this. She's a very level-headed person and would bring me back down to earth when I would launch too far. The staff here at the Senior Center, oh my goodness, if y'all don't know the staff here, they are the most wonderful people on Vashon. I am so fortunate to work with every single one of them. I hope they know how much I appreciate them. Peter Kenyon, I see you there. Peter was over in the States a couple years ago and stopped by the Senior Center, and I was able to pick his brain, and he shared a lot of wonderful information with me, and that's where I kind of got the formation of our village project and where we are today. And then again, I'd like to also thank, and y'all will hear from her in a little while, Evie Horton, who is the Vashon Villages program manager. She is phenomenal. If you don't know her, please get to know her. She is a lovely person, and she'll be here in just a little bit. I'm just learning now from her that her computer has completely crashed. Oh, she's trying to join, but in lieu of that, I will go ahead and read the bios of our panelists. All right. Let's see. The Village to Village Network is the national association that represents more than 300 villages in the United States, 4 countries around the world, in the village movement's model for aging. So this is not just a Vashon activity or program. This is worldwide, and we are just so grateful for all the guidance that the Village to Village Network has given us. First of all, Barbara Sullivan, for nearly 15 years, she has been active in the village movement to help older people stay in their homes, including serving for nearly 10 years as executive director of Mount Vernon at Home, a village in Alexandria, Virginia. In June 2018, Barbara was appointed to the National Director for the Village to Village Network. Barbara was probably the first village person that I encountered, and I think I was driving her crazy because it was, what, 2 days before your conference, and I couldn't figure out how to register. So thank you for your patience, Barbara. Appreciate that. Eddie Rivas, pronounced, all right, serves as a Village to Village Network board member and is on the board of the Potomac Community Village, his local village. Eddie's professional background includes work as a lobbyist for aging policy with aging and national aging organizations, including AARP and is staff of the U.S. House Select Committee on Aging. Eddie's work features an emphasis on underserved communities, including people living with disabilities. And I mentioned Peter a moment ago, but Peter is an author, social entrepreneur, international consultant, and community enthusiast. 30 years ago, Peter created the Bank of Ideas, initiatives for the development of enterprising action and strategies, which promotes community building, not from the top down or from the outside in, but from the inside out. And most of y'all here on Vashon probably know our fourth panelist, Barbara Wells. Barbara is an Islander and a member of the Vashon Senior Center. Barbara's been interested in the village movement since 2002, when the first village, the Beacon Hill Village in Boston, was established and began its good work, and Barbara lived nearby. Barbara was on the board of an earlier attempt on Vashon to organize a village, and she is hopeful that this one will succeed. So with that, Evie, shall I turn it over to our panelists? Oh, Evie, you're frozen again. Pamela, if you could help me unmute the panelists. Panelists, can y'all say something so we can see?
Yeah, I'm not sure who the people are on the panel.
I think I unmuted myself. I think people can do that.
Yeah, I just did it.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. All right. And Evie, can you come into my office if she'd prefer? I can step out and she can use my computer if she'd like.
Yeah, Peter, I think you're still on mute. If you could unmute yourself, sir. All righty. And Eddie, are you?
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. All right. Hang on just one second with Evie being the maestro here. I think
So-
had some questions prepared for y'all. Here she comes. Evie, you want to hop on here? Evie and I are going to trade places, and she's going to lead the panel.
Ta-da! Hi, everybody. Thank you. Our bandwidth can't quite keep up with all this activity. I'm Evie Horton. Thanks for the introduction, Catherine. I think you finished reading the bios for our panel.
Yeah.
And so we'll turn it over to the panel now in turn. Just about 10 minutes for each entity, the Village Network. Barbara and Eddie, welcome. And Peter and our local hero, Barbara Wells. I'll keep time and I'll signal a 2-minute warning just as we get closer to the middle of the agenda. And Liz, our board president, is going to serve as a note taker for us. And just another reminder that this is being recorded. So just bear with the hiccups and we can press on. Thank you so much.
Great. All right. Well, I guess I'll start. I'm Barbara Sullivan, and thank you for including Eddie and I in this conversation. And it was a nice overview of what the village movement is. I won't go back into big detail on how we started, but the movement is 20 years old. It is, started in Beacon Hill, but then it blossomed. In 10 years later, in 2009, it evolved, and it continues to evolve to, engage and serve the community that they live in. So when you hear the expression, when you've seen one village, you've seen one's village, it's very true. People say, I don't like that, but it's very true. The villages serve what's needed in their community. So as you continue with Vashon, you look at what is there and existing, and the village model is to extend and promote and enhance existing services and then complement with more. Our mission, the network's mission, it enables community members to build and sustain thriving villages. And it's back to that basic neighbor helping neighbor. I think in society, we got away from helping each other. And if anything, this pandemic has shown us more so than ever that we need each other. We need our community supports. And so I think that the people who started, back in 2001, two, they really had something when they realized, we need more support services. We want to age in our community, not necessarily in place, but in our, in our homes, but in our communities is a bigger and growing need, and how to do that and accomplish it. You know, membership in the B2B network has grown over the last 10 years. It started in 2010 with 68 organizations. And I'm going to tell you, they started in Boston, they swept down to the Washington metropolitan area, and then out to the West Coast. So you see a lot of the villages that are now 10, 11 years old, not taking away Beacon Hill Village, but there's a group of villages that are they were the stronghold, and they were mentoring other villages within their community. Today, we have about 350 villages throughout the United States, about 280 in open and operating, and another 80 in development. I'm very happy to report, not happy, but that we only had about a handful of villages, less than a handful of villages, that suspended services during COVID. And one that actually folded, unfortunately. But they didn't want to give up their 501c3. They may be back in the end of 2021. So we'll see. But it gives a resilience and an opportunity to look at the services that is needed within the community. I'm only going to touch on one more thing, and that's the network itself was created by villages for villages. And what that is we're a village commons. The network itself has a twofold responsibility. One is that mentoring, the support services, the webinars, the Village 101, as you guys are opportunity members and developing. We have a Village 101 toolkit, and it helps you step by step and guides you in the direction your village needs, not what your next door neighbor or other villages, in Washington or wherever. It's what you need, and helps you guide, through strategic planning, through, committee, reports, and a cohesive way to open this village and sustain within your community. And I'm going to turn it over to Eddie, and he can talk about the other arm, the advocating and whatnot.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, late afternoon from the East Coast, where Barbara and I are. Really, I'm going to be very brief because, if anything, I'm more interested in your discussion and your questions and answers. But where I come from with Barbara and our background, we've known each other for quite a while. And actually, I indirectly worked for her father when I was in the House Select Committee on Aging. Her dad was one of the chair people of one of the subcommittees. But where I came from with the villages was, once I heard about the village model, just a few years after the original Beacon Hill Village started, I recognized that my generation, boomers, were going to be one of the largest generations of older people to come along the pike. I mean, now granted, we can get into demographics and talk about what's the biggest generation and what part of the demographic is growing faster, things like that. But the bottom line was, baby boomers are a big cohort of people who are in the middle of turning over to 65 years of age. Mind you, villages can serve people at any age. We do have villages across the country that are serving folks of any age with disabilities, things like that. But my selfish perspective was simply, I'm one of those boomers who never had children. And even though I'm a Latinx person who believes in family and family supports to the nth degree, I also recognize that there will come a point when my wife and I may not have anybody around who will look out for us. And the idea of creating community with neighbors in our community and creating those mutual supports was so important, because, like it or not, no matter how much advocacy we can all do at the local, state, and national level, we will never have the amount of funding needed for all the long-term services and supports that older people eventually need. It's just not going to happen. Right now, in the COVID bill that the president is pushing, there is some language inserted to try to expand home and community-based services within the Medicaid system. Well, I would probably venture a guess that not many of us on this Zoom call right now are eligible for Medicaid services. That's one of the big dilemmas of our national policy agenda. We have low-income individuals who do get access and help in getting their services paid for through Medicaid and other low-income programs like the low-income home energy assistance program, food stamp, TANF program, things like that. And then you have people who have plenty of assets who can pay for private pay to have a nurse come and take care of them in their older age. However, many in the middle don't have access to those things and can't necessarily afford to pay $30 for a home care worker to come into the home. And that's where the village model really sets a really nice example for how we as neighbors can support each other. And I can't stress enough. And now they're telling us that even I believe it's millennials, there are more millennials and there will be baby boomers as they grow older. The problem is never going to go away until people stop having children, period. But that's beside the point. So that's the perspective, and part of what I try to lend to Barbara and the board is a very practical policy perspective. What can we all do to make sure that the village model continues to grow, evolve? And I say this to all of you, we really need to step up our game when it comes to making sure that our communities even know who we are. Here in the DC area, the Washington, DC metropolitan area, and that's between Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, DC, there are over 30 villages in existence. Actually, it might be closer to 40. And yet we don't get that much media attention. And it's something that, frustrated the living daylights out of me when COVID hit and we'd hear about all these nice groups who are all of a sudden getting meals and distributing food and things like that. And I sat there scratching my head thinking, well, villages do that, maybe not at a grand scale, but we do that with our communities already. Why can't we get somebody to pay attention to us? So we all have a lot of work to do to make sure that we educate our communities. And when I say communities, I don't mean just our fellow citizens, but I mean our elected and appointed officials, the media, the religious groups. You will find some communities where the religious affiliated entities feel like villages are trying to compete with them. And I will say to you what an assistant secretary on aging said to me during the Clinton administration. He said, don't even give voice to those conversations about competing for resources. There's so much work to do when it comes to the elderly that there's plenty for us to share and just try to get along and support each other. So that's really a big part of the perspective. I will, I guess, offer a consideration. Again, villages tend to be a model that is looking to the needs of an older person. However, I will tell you that in Potomac, our village specifically, since the high school students really need their community service hours, we actually have a board member who is a high school student who, when we need some muscle to help do something for us, like right now, beginning of the year, we did Happy New Year goodie bags to all of our members. And we put some masks in, some candy and little things, a couple of puzzles, things like that. The high schoolers, there was about a half a dozen of them that went out and delivered them to all of our members throughout our community. When we used to have in-person monthly gatherings, the high schoolers always had a table at the back of the room. And usually we had at least 3 of them there who became our tech support. And
Good idea.
All the villages just knew, bring in your portable devices, be it your laptop, be it your phone, your tablet, and they're there to help. And they usually could figure out whatever questions we threw at them. I know I use them, and I'm one of the more savvy people on our board when it comes to tech. So do consider the intergenerational aspects of all this. Do consider the needs, the special needs of our disabled and mentally, cognitively disabled individuals and underserved populations in general. That is the one thing that Barbara and I are trying to figure out, is how do we really spread the news into low-income communities and communities of color.
And
I'm sorry.
sorry, Eddie, I thought you were at a good pause for me to take us to our next panelist, but please continue.
Okay. Oh, no. And I was going to end there.
Just giving you the hook.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
No, that's fine. I just, food for thought. Think about reaching out to those underserved communities. That's it.
We love it. We love it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your perspective, Barbara and Eddie.
You're welcome.
And now we'll hear from Peter Kenyon, please. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, or for you, it's probably the middle of the day. For me, it's 5 a.m. in the morning in the hills out of Perth, a place called Kalamunda, which means home in the forest. And it's so good to connect with people in Vashon Island. I have a very good friend there, Jim Deers, who some of you may know. And it was through Jim that about 2 years ago, I had the privilege of, for my second time, to spend time on Vashon. And I was particularly on my way to a conference that was being held and run by the Village to Village Network, and with people like Barbara. And I thought I'd go via Seattle and just have a look at what you were doing in this particular space. And I need to say that over those couple of days, I had the privilege to seeing 3 of your hubs that operate in Seattle. But being based on Vashon, Jim insisted I needed to go and have a look at the local centre that was doing amazing things with aging people on the island. And that's where I met Catherine, and very inspired by what was already happening there. And it also helped to colour what I was interested in. I was keen to try to look at a model where I live. It shares many of the characteristics of Vashon Island. We're a hills community. We're a collection of small little communities, very much like yourself. We're not an island, but we're up there out of the city of kind of like Perth. And I suppose what we ended up wanting to look at was simply, how do we create a mutual where people do not need to age alone? And that really became simply the mission. And I suppose what we've tried to create is a model where people can age as long as possible in their own homes, their own streets, their own neighborhoods, their own little towns, as long as possible, as meaningful as possible, and as inexpensively as possible. And I suppose they were the 3 things that we then started to look at. How do we create that model? Now, here in Australia, the village, what you call the village movement, we tend to probably call the hub movement, is very young. But there was already one group, and it was called the Waverton Hub in North Sydney in the state of New South Wales. And so we went and visited that and listened to them and benefited from them, leapfrogged on their experiences. We suddenly discovered there was another hub actually operating within the city of Perth, the Victoria Park Connect. And we looked at that, and we very quickly learnt that principle: when you've seen one hub, you've only seen one hub, because we then began to discover there are others. And then we reached out through groups like the Village to Village Network and began to discover a whole pile of different models that were operating across the US. And subsequently, we've created, where I live, what's called the Darling Range, kind of like Seniors Hub. But we've changed the name. It's now just called the Darling Range Hub, because so many of our people don't like that label called seniors, and nor do we want to be a generation. We want to be intergeneration. And so we're open to everyone. Primarily it's people who are aging, people who have retired, people who are trying to create a whole new support network around that stage of life. But increasingly, we're getting younger people who are becoming part of this mutual that we have kind of like created. And it's a mutual that fundamentally is about social connection. That to me is probably the underlying principle. We're working on probably about 5, and one of them is this thing that people need connection. A healthy life, a healthy community is all about relationships. It's all about healthy. And so how do we get people fundamentally connected is what we're particularly interested in. I've already mentioned we've got the principle of being intergenerational. We believe that a healthy community is one where that kind of like operates. And thirdly, we are very much based on the principle that we need to wrap community around people and not just more services, and that we fundamentally need to connect people to neighbour and to this thing called community, and look at the way we wrap community. With that comes a new principle that we are really trying to turn the type of community development model that we've seen grown in this country over the last 40 years. It's a model where we do things to people and for people. Bit of an old missionary model, really, but it's kind of like dominate service land. And so we want a new model that actually counteracts that service land model of to and for, and we want to focus on of and by. We want to encourage service land to do things with people. And so that focus on to and by people and with people has really become a really important principle. And with that comes the belief, and certainly I've learned from a fellow called Jim Deers on Vashon Island more than any other person on this planet, that everyone has gifts. Everyone has a contribution. And you know what? To live a kind of like healthy life is about feeling that you are needed and that you have a contribution, and people open doors and windows to allow those contributions to happen. And so a major part of our hub is really asset mapping. It's about mapping what people bring to the table and finding ways to do it. We believe simply that everyone has gifts, everyone cares about something. And so very early on, we started to discover what is it that people care about? What is it that people have as gifts of the head, gifts of the heart, gifts of the hands, gifts of the feet? What is it that people can contribute? And through that, we've created a hub model that's very much based on this principle of community connect. And we have within it a very simple kind of like program. It's a mutual. We employ someone 25 hours a week that we've been able to establish through a gift, particularly from our local community bank, but mainly through also contributions from local businesses. We've also scored a few small government grants to help us. But fundamentally, it's an organisation run by the membership, and people have a role. And within it, we have these 3 Connect programs under Community Connect. Social Connect. We just look at lots of ways that people just come together around what they care about. So yes, we have the traditional stuff, morning teas, bus tours, but we now got a Scrabble group. We've got a philosophy in the pub group. One that I've created is, it happens this morning on a Saturday morning, about 20 of us are into e-biking, something that's really grown during COVID-19. And so we ride through our forests and end up in a few cute little country towns, have a coffee and cycle back. A whole pile of things around that is what we are fundamentally doing. Games, there's gardening, kind of like groups, but it really starts with what people care about, what people feel that they can do. And they're basically run by people who have that interest with other people who either want to be part of it or learn from it or also share that interest. We also have a Neighbour Connect program that's very much about connecting people to their neighbours. And boy, we just got started. We were about to launch when COVID hit us. Our launch was the 26th of March. We had to go into lockdown. We had to cancel it. But you know what? Immediately our organisation changed. We had a thing in mind called Neighbour Connect, Neighbour Hug. Well, you can imagine that term had to be dropped during COVID. And we've gone to Neighbour Connect. And we just encouraged neighbour to support neighbour with things as simple as grocery shopping, small repairs to the house. And we now have a phone brigade, for example, people who just ring a whole pile of people who basically don't have any good, strong social networks. And they fundamentally ring and keep in touch with people, have a good social conversation. So we're doing a whole pile of those things in what we call Neighbour Connect, helping to deliver people for medical appointments and that stuff. And one of the ideas we particularly pinched out of the American model, and particularly I learned a lot of it from being in Seattle, was the Business Connect program. And we've now got close to 30 local businesses who are doing the right thing by our members. We aim by the end of the year have over 100 local businesses that have committed to kind of like supporting our membership through discounts. But also we've got probably then, our aim is to have over 250 businesses that members are recommending and say, you know what, they'll do the right thing by you. And so that whole area we have started to build. As I said, it is very much an organisation built on the philosophy, this is of and by, kind of like people. It is a mutual, it is the old-fashioned cooperative that our whole country was kind of like based upon back in the 1900s, when most developments, whether it be a business or housing or agriculture, people use the co-op model. And I suppose that's the concept that we have gone back to. We have a very strong community banking movement in this country based on the same principles. And so this is an extension of it. It fits kind of like very much our culture, our historic culture. It is also, as I said, an attempt to reverse what we have seen in this country for the last 40 years and what I call the service land model, where you have these services who have come in to do things to and for people. And so we are very much trying to reverse a lot of that. It's been an incredible journey, and our membership kind of like is growing even during the COVID time. COVID has its silver linings, and one of them is that people have really valued kind of like community connection. In fact, service land collapsed in this country during COVID. When we went into lockdown, you couldn't do your services. And what ended up happening is people turned to each other, turned to neighbours, and boy, has that been a boom for our movement. People have discovered that social solidarity, community solidarity, neighbour connection, stuff happening in the street actually makes all the difference at the end of the day. And so we very much have kind of like been built upon that. As the movement grows, it's going into new things. We're just about to try to launch a new program called Living Legends, where we are discovering a whole pile of people to be story kind of like listeners who go and write up the story of storytellers, older people about their life, and interview their families and whatever, and then produce a book of kind of like those stories and so on. That's kind of like a latest little initiative that we're launching. We were about, until we had to go down into lockdown again a week ago here, the first time we'd actually had a community transmission case in 10 months, believe it or not. We, in a few weeks' time, we're planning a festival for aging well. And that was an attempt to bring together all of the groups who operate, the men's sheds, the Country Women's Association, the Rotary clubs. There's a whole range of organisations, Probus groups that really target people, and particularly people who are retiring and whatever. And we decided to create a festival for aging well here. And we've now had to postpone that probably for 2 months. But they're the type of stuff that we're moving into. So can I just say, it's an exciting kind of like day for you. It's an exciting initiative that you're creating there on Vashon Island. I wish you well. And certainly can I say thank you for what your island and what Seattle and what the US have actually contributed to our development. We'll be ever, ever thankful for the ability to leapfrog on the experience of the village movement in the US, and particularly those 3 villages that you had in Seattle were incredibly helpful to us. So I wish you well. Go well.
Thank you so much for that information and being so gracious to us as the country and as a county and a city here on Vashon and in the greater King County area. Just to let people know, there is a Greater Seattle Task Force of Villages, and I've just newly joined them for their first quarterly meeting last month. So getting a little taste of the villages that Peter's talking about as I get my feet wet in this movement. And now, we've gone national, we've gone international, and now we'll bring it back here to Vashon Island and hear from Barbara Wells, if you please. Thank you.
Hello. I'm happy to be here, and back in, oh my goodness, quite a long time ago. I lived in Boston and I watched the Beacon Hill Village develop. I was fascinated by it. They were beautifully positioned. Beacon Hill in Boston is right between Mass General Hospital and the Boston Common. So there was medical facility and recreational facility. And in the middle were seniors who needed ways of getting there, knowing about these things, and being able to have company. I still have a friend in Boston who is still a member of the Beacon Hill Village, and I spoke with her recently, and she said because of COVID, so much of what was important back at the beginning has changed. She said today the most important need she felt was social connection. Excuse me. Things like transportation, which is a big need, has been pretty much taken over by Lyft and Uber, and food. And now I'm speaking of Vashon, it's easy to have, the grocery stores will deliver your food, which is wonderful, or you can go at 7 o'clock on Saturday morning and shop as a senior without a lot of other people around. So much has changed since the beginning of the Beacon Hill Village, but that need for social connection, that's huge. On Vashon, we have many of the things already that Peter was talking about. Your Living Legends program, we had a living legend on the island. I want to give a shout out to Dorothy Hall Bauer, who recently passed away in her late 90s, but she wrote a series of books called Know Your Neighbor, and she would call up people she didn't know, interview them, and write a terrific little monograph. And also Kim Farrell would take photographs. So we have some of these things in place. Let's see, I'm trying to think what would be relevant for me to talk about. Well, we tried to have a village here on Vashon a number of years ago. And we got about halfway there. We had a board. I was one of the board members. My job was to call all over the country, which I did. I spoke to many, many villages, and I was interested to find out how different they all were. But the one thing, the most common need at that time was transportation. But now, because of Uber and Lyft, and also we have a community van, we have a lot here on Vashon that addresses that need. The big problem, if anyone's interested to know why it fell apart, and it was very sad to see this happen because we started with a lot of enthusiasm. I think we had something like 9 people on the board. We did a lot of research on the village network. We knew what it stood for, how it worked, what it could do for the island, but the problem became money. Beacon Hill Village today, to be a member, costs a little more than $600. My friend, who I spoke to recently, she is a scholarship member, so she doesn't have to pay. As a matter of fact, they actually give her money so that if she wants to go to, well, an event, which of course today in COVID, not too many events, but they will actually give her money. But we felt here on the island that that would create a big problem because some people could afford to be members, others could not afford. And we were considering giving a discount for things like plumbers and carpenters. And that would have resulted in the group that could afford a membership getting a discount, and the people who couldn't afford a membership would be paying more for these services. We also tried to have a number of volunteer services. So anyway, I'm glad to see that Vashon Village is ramping up again, and I wish it the best, and I'd love to be involved in any way I could. Good luck.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Barbara, Peter, Barbara, and Eddie. This was a wonderful context setting for us to now get right to what we're up to here at the Senior Center. Thank you very much for joining us and enduring some of these hiccups with the tech. I'm going to introduce Catherine Swearingen again and mute myself so we can hear from her.
All righty. Thank you, everyone. Now maybe the rest of you can see why I'm so excited about having villages on Vashon. Evie is sharing her screen because we put together just a little presentation for you today. I'm a visual person, as you will see in just a minute. But thank you, panelists. It is so wonderful to hear everything happening in the village movement internationally, nationally, and coming up locally. So that's what I want to talk to you about. I apologize for wearing a mask, but because of technical difficulties, Evie and I are sitting in the same room. So we are masked up to be safe. And so the panelists pretty much gave a great background on what the villages are, why they're important in a community. And now I'm going to talk to you a little bit more, very briefly, about the how and the where when it comes to Vashon. You can do the next one. So if you know me at all, you know that I'm a pretty visual person. And so Evie found my original scratch paper where I got this vision out of my head and put it on paper. And what she didn't see were the other 3 or 4 scratched out versions. But so how did we get from my brain to the scratch paper? It was just so exciting to me to realize that we were already doing some village type things here at the Senior Center with our Bluebird Medical Transportation Program and our Neighbor to Neighbor program, but that this opportunity could help us serve seniors on Vashon outside of our Senior Center. And so that's where I started refining it, and Evie is gonna show you now sort of a little bit more formal of how I got this from my brain to where we are now. So you can see on the left a little bit better visual of what I envisioned for the villages, and then actually writing the grant proposal, which we turned in late February of last year, just in time for COVID. And so that has made us also realize some things that I think we might not have noticed quite as quickly before around technology, connectivity, things like that. So I'm looking at COVID as somewhat of a silver lining. But I got some technical assistance from a group called 501 Commons that I'm so grateful to. My board listened to me, bounced ideas off of them. And fortunately, I turned this mind map and scribble into a proposal that fortunately was funded. And I would just like to say thank you to King County and to you all, the taxpayers here on Vashon. Your property taxes are making this possible. And so your property taxes go to the Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy, which is the funding source for our Vashon villages. So we were also successful and had sort of a bonus funding. With this money, we have been able to purchase a new van for the center. So we're going to have another means of transportation. It's fully accessible. It's a little bit bigger than the one we have now, but it's going to allow us, when COVID allows us, to provide a little bit more transportation and more opportunities to go off island and go to a museum or take a trip somewhere. And so I'm very, very grateful for that. It's not going to be as cute as the Magic Bus that you see here or the Mystery Machine, but I'm very excited about that. And so that's how we got to where we pretty much are now. And you can, the next one would be great, Evie. So where are we going to do this? So rather than try and bite off way too much and not be successful, I thought maybe we should break this down into smaller chunks and think about neighborhoods. And so Vicki de Monterey-Rochou, I see you on here. I talked with Vicki because she oversees the Neros. And I talked to her about that model and figuring that, as we all know, the same people pretty much volunteer to do everything in a town. And so where there were active Neros, I thought it would be a good shot that we might have, some active volunteers. And so also thinking about issues like transportation, socialization, location and proximity to the senior center. And so I came up with Spring Beach, sort of in town, and then the Gold Beach area as our 3 pilot neighborhoods. This could very well change. They could grow, they could morph, they could merge. I don't know what's going to happen. It's just very exciting. And so this is how we got from reading an RFP to where we are today. And I am so excited to now turn this over to Evie Horton, who is the Vashon Villages program manager. And she is going to fill you in on the rest of our story so far and sort of where we're hoping to go. All right. Thank you, Evie.
Thanks, Catherine. I hope everyone can hear me. Thanks for the update on the where, what.
I don't know why you're. Oh, I'm muting.
And I'll take you through to the who of all this. So who? But before we get too much into this idea, I'd like to make a statement of thanks to our crack team of local community assessment volunteers. These are the Village Cats, the Village Community Assessment Team. You heard about Keith Pryor, without whom a lot of this work would be just an idea. Jill, Karen, John, Liz, Diane, Susie, Steve, and Linda. So this is a critically important phase of readying a volunteer base for this work. And for this phase, we are really looking to volunteers who we call village builders. They will be foundational to establishing our village program. Earlier, I introduced Peter Kenyon Catherine did, as a social capitalist, which is an opportunity for me to share what that means. Social capital is the connections, common values, and shared understandings in a society that enable us as individuals and as groups to trust each other and to work together for a common purpose. It's summed up in the lovely message that you see on the screen. This is what this work is all about, drawing on local resources, the volunteers and members themselves, the assets and talents of the community. And here we are also reminded that inclusiveness and reciprocity are core principles of the village movement. Everyone has a purpose and has something to contribute. And so the big reveal about when this is rolling out, we are heading into another important phase in developing the Vashon Villages over the next 2 months. And of course, we are navigating this in the midst of a global pandemic. On the administrative side, we are learning new software that will support service delivery by connecting village members with village volunteers. And I should note that there are seniors in our community who live without access to Wi-Fi. Maybe they wanted to join us today, but they didn't have devices or the skills confidence to access the internet. My point is here that my role is in place to support village members who live with these barriers as the program manager. And moving on, just a little glimpse of what you probably have seen if you've visited the Senior Center's website. So the new software that we're going to be subscribing to, you may be familiar with this page on the website. You can see the loop there. This is going to be the access point to the Vashon Villages for members and volunteers, that circled link. And of course, we'll be communicating through the center's monthly member newsletter as a great resource to share what we're up to. The Senior Center is a trusted entity on Vashon, and trust contributes to community cohesion. The Senior Center is here to stay despite huge challenges. Looking at you, COVID-19. The center is committed to this new long-term program, and we are so grateful to King County for investing in it. We are excited about the prospect of extending our work across the island through the Village movement, and we hope you are too. And now, as we prepare to take your questions, we're just going to take a look at this image, which depicts some of the recurring words that were used by participants who took our community assessment survey. There were 149 participants. And this graphic depicts some common themes and things you've heard about today, just in the few minutes we've been together, such as transportation, neighbors, independence, being able to connect. And we extend our gratitude to each community assessment participant for helping shape the Vashon Villages. And so we'll take some questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'll call on anyone who has questions. I'm going to call on you from left to right in my screen. That might not look the same to you. So bear with us.
Hello.
Please raise your, yes, hi, Renee.
Yeah, this is Rene Hinojosa. I just retired from Michigan. I'm trying to move to Vashon, although I'm here already partially. But I recently talked to Keith Pryor, and he explained to me what's going on. It's a very exciting program. But my question now to you is, it's been a time when you took the survey. When are we going to see the results? Hello?
Yes, one moment for us. Thank you. And Renee, you can go ahead and mute yourself, please.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe you didn't hear me.
I did, thank you. Keith and I will be meeting next week to shape some reporting for data related to the community assessment. And we also internally, we have a board meeting later this month, mid-month, where we'll see some of those results captured more quantitatively.
Okay, good. I'll be very
Yes,
curious to know the results.
yes,
Thank you.
thank you. And did I see Barbara Sullivan had a question?
No, I was just going to comment on something, Evie, if you
Please.
don't mind. To Renee's point, it takes an average of 18 months to 2 years for a village to really get up and operational. And the one word I have to say is be patient. It does, you know that movie Field of Dreams, you build it, they'll come. Well, you're building it. And there's a lot of layers, and to do it right. And just like Barbara said, they started it once before and there was a financial sustainability component to it. You guys are doing it right. And so stay the course.
Thank you for that, Barbara. Anyone else have a question? I have to tick through my screen because we've got so many lovely people attending. I don't see any hands, but I'll keep ticking back. Barbara Wells, please.
Well, as I said about the first attempt at creating a village system here on Vashon, we ran into this problem of how is it supported? As I told you, the Beacon Hill Village charges a little more than $600 a person. So how are you going to support it on Vashon?
Hi, Barbara, I will take that one. So we have deliberately designed this to be affordable for folks on Vashon. And we are able to do that because of the funding from King County. Without that, we would be scrambling for even the money to do the administrative pieces. And so what I envision is a membership fee that is comparable to a membership fee in the senior center, because we're not going to have to beg and plead for the oversight to pay for the software and the insurance and the van and things like that. I want this to be available to every senior on Vashon, and so we are going to fight tooth and nail to keep the fees as low as possible. I also was fortunate in that part of the funding that we got will go to pay for scholarships for members who are unable to even meet that modest fee. And so we're doing everything we can to make it affordable. It will not be anything like your Beacon Hill friends, I promise you that. Okay.
I just want to congratulate you on getting that fabulous grant that I know is a big part of this. And, but to ask you, I understand it's a 4-year grant. So what happens after year 4?
Another grant.
There you go. There you go. No, part of what we are operating under is, yes, we know we have the funding from the county for at least 2 years. It is a 4-year grant cycle, but it's, those of you who live here, it's a biennial budget for the county. I'm confident that this funding will continue as we intended, but they aren't planning to be here forever to fund this. And so, yes, we will start looking into other funding sources. We're going to get our feet under us first and make sure we're operational. But then I anticipate a lot of grant writing in my future and Ebby's future. And hopefully we can find additional funding so that we can keep the villages going, so that the senior center can support them fully. And that even if the funding from the county doesn't continue, that the villages will continue on Vashon.
Great, thanks.
Can I just say from the Australian
And
point of
if you
view,
have any other questions, feel free to unmute yourself. We think we can manage
Yep.
that all together. Anyone?
This is Jack Skeffington. I don't know if you can hear me yet. I wanted to go back to Renee and say, I know it sounds like you're visiting Vashon. I hope that where these virtual villages are set up doesn't affect where you want to settle on the island, or if that's a consideration.
No, I'm excited. I'm attracted. And I was very excited to hear somebody mention social capital. I work at the University of Michigan, and we're very high on social capital, and we wrote several books and so on about it. So if there is any way I can help, I'll be very glad. But thank you for welcoming me.
Yeah, I just wanted to assure you that the senior center is for everyone on the island, and it doesn't matter where you're located, and how these particular 3 spots were located to start as our seed for the virtual villages was one issue. And we hope that this program will grow to where there are a number of centers around the island.
Yeah, Burton should be one.
Okay, we have a vote for Burton, at least one vote for Burton. Well done, Renee. Any other questions, please? Well, I'll say something just in the meantime, while people maybe think of a question or two for the rest of our time together. For many months, I've been thinking about COVID, this whole coronavirus scenario that we're all moving through and coping with. I think about it as a huge experiment, vast global experiment. And I can't help but think about the Vashon villages as an experiment within an experiment. So it's just an exciting time. There are lots of opportunities for us to explore. I wasn't living on the island when I began working with the senior center. I've been here now just about 2 months, so it was important for me to be in the place if I'm not of Vashon Island. But I hope this idea of us taking this into 2021 and beyond really just comes together nicely. Anyone else want to pipe up and unmute with a question? Please go for it. I'll mute my. Catherine, you want to wrap it up at all?
Barbara.
I don't know if you can see me. Sometimes not working. Anyway, my name's Wesley, and I don't have so much a question as an observation, and that is that, and this is about the money. If this works, optimistically, wouldn't it just take off and people would, I mean, isn't that the reason behind this, for people to get together on their own?
From your lips, Wesley, to everyone's ears.
It's not working, huh? I don't know.
Leslie, I said just from your lips to the village's ears. That's well stated, and it's a wonderful sentiment. Thank you.
Yeah, but I hope it works. It's great.
Peter, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to just share the same sentiment. Don't get focused. We have a very crude expression in Australia. Don't live on the tit of government funding. What you've got to do is basically create your own resource, and it's within the membership. The average membership fee now in Australia is $55. We don't have high fees. We have free fees. We have what we call champion fees, where people pay double to pay for someone who can't. We will not exclude anyone. If you're a member of our community bank or one of our other senior organisations, you get $10 off that as well. And so we've found that the maximum that we can charge is about $55 a year. And we try to keep those fees very low. So how do we get the dough? Well, there's a couple of things. One is a lot of it is done by the membership. All of our activities self-fund themselves. So the bike group pays for their own kind of like different bits and pieces and whatever. Secondly, we have members who are committed to the fundraising. So we have one guy who's just brilliant, and this morning he's out in the shopping centre. We're running a raffle, and in a 2-month period, he'll raise $16,000 for the hub. And that is just kind of like members kind of like generating activities that actually happen. We make sure we have raffles and auctions at all the times we do things. We have some major fundraising during the day, but we do not get caught up with believing that we just need to go from one government grant to the other, because with government grants come stipulation, you've got to do this, and you find groups have to keep changing their dance pattern to kind of like dance under the latest kind of like funding pattern. We also have a very simple business sponsorship arrangement where we now have probably got at least 15 local businesses who are contributing either at a bronze level, a silver level, a gold level, or a platinum level, kind of like sponsorship. And that this year will generate us about $25,000 through that support from the business community. So all I'm saying is be careful how much you charge and what it might do to exclude people. We certainly don't want that ever to be the reason. And if we find anyone who certainly can't afford it, we just create the opportunity. That's not an issue. You are a member. People are able to contribute what they are. But we've found that going by a lower fee and finding other ways to generate the income has really worked. And that's working in a number of places now across Australia.
Perfect. Thank you, Peter. Yes, I agree with the becoming self-sufficient, and it's my goal that the senior center become sort of in the background to the villages, and that the villages themselves here, which is the members of the villages, that we're here to support you, not to be the one leading you. And so right now, while we're in this build-in phase, yes, we are here to sort of put the checks in the boxes and make sure that all the systems are in place, so that when people start joining the village, we're here to facilitate. And if I didn't mention it, my vision is that each village will decide for itself what their priorities are. One village may decide that they want more social interactions. I've heard that from the Gold Beach area. And so that may be sort of their focus. There might be another area that has higher needs for transportation, or neighbors helping neighbors with home repair, something like that. So while we're here to facilitate and support, we are not going to be the ones making all of the decisions for the villages. So it's a joint effort, and we're here to support and facilitate and help raise money however we can to make sure that these things grow, and that hopefully we'll get more villages across the island. And who knows, maybe one day Vashon will become one giant village. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So Barbara, yeah.
How many households, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, and also this is for Peter. How many households are considered to be a good number of households in a village?
I don't know whether we've ever actually looked at that. I mean, I live in a community overall. We're about 16 sub-communities, mainly small towns and urban neighbourhoods that are moving out from the city. We're probably a community of just under 70,000 people. We have a central hub, and we've now set up satellite hubs in different areas. We've never quite looked at it. We have about 25% of our population is actually 55 years and over. So, you know, in terms of a demographic, it's certainly probably slightly higher than the state average. Yeah, we've never quite seen what the number is. Our aim is by the end of the year to have over 200 financial members who are in it. We have been setting up a rural hub that's down the road, and it's a town of 1,100 people, and they're setting up a hub because they actually close to their average age in that community is 55 years old. They see this model incredible. They're linking in with some of the other small towns, but fundamentally they're a community of 1,100, and this model, they're adapting it to themselves. It's very much that philosophy of the hub village, and that is when you've seen one, you've seen one. We're all different how we actually operate, but we've never found the number thing and a proportion. It's about active membership that I think is the critical kind of like factor. How do we grow people's involvement? And part of that, as I said earlier, is to keep the fee as low as possible. And if anyone can't find it, well, that's not going to be an issue and no one will know about it. We'll always find a way. What we want is engagement, not their membership fee. And so our aim is to just keep expanding and realizing ultimately the membership and members need to lead on everything. Our 25-hour-a-week coordinator is cream on the cake to us. She is the arms and legs that can do things that we can't in terms of keeping a number of things going. But very much, we've made it very clear that it's the members who've got to drive this organisation. And so we've got a whole pile of what we call task teams that are operating on different areas. And people just take on a thing and we give it a go. We try to ensure that all of our social activities that are running are all self-contained within their own cost structure. So we don't subsidise any of that. Members kind of like create it themselves.
Evian, this is Sandra dialing in from New York.
That's me, Evie. Hi.
Hi, Evie, sorry. I'm wondering if you can talk about the volunteer workforce that you have going at Vashon.
Sure. Oh, sorry, Evie. Oh. Yeah, so right now, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Vashon Senior Center, we've got a few programs that do operate outside the senior center, or at least they did before COVID, and hopefully will again post-COVID. But we have a program called Neighbor to Neighbor, and this is a group of senior center volunteers who will help with everything from flipping someone's mattress to cutting grass, rehanging a cabinet door, giving a ride to our local medical facility, sometimes companionship, wellness checks, etc. And so that's a very good question, and I'm glad you brought that up because I may not have mentioned this, but we're thinking in terms of not just members as seniors, but also we want volunteers to join and be part of the villages. Because, you know, if you need a cabinet door hung, your neighbor who's also your same age may not be the person that can help you, but there's a younger family in your neighborhood and they might be able to help. So it's again, trying to include more neighbors in these villages, not just seniors. So It's going to be, it's a balance between enough volunteers to help the folks that are needing help. And so that's where the folks in the villages can also help us reach out to their neighbors. And let's grow this thing.
Excellent. Thank you so much,
Liz.
Catherine.
Liz,
Thank
you have a,
Yeah, I just wanted to build on that because you spun off the acronym NEROS earlier in your talk, and I'm thinking that some people might not know that acronym refers to Neighborhood Emergency Response Organizations, which was a network of catastrophe responders that were put together within the last 10 or 12 years. Bernie could probably help me with these numbers, or some other longtime local. Oh, Vicky's here. Vicky, you should talk a little bit about NEROS because that's such an important model, I think, for us to be piggybacking on and indeed benefiting from.
Yeah, these are informal groups of 5 to 15 households within an easy geographic proximity that can support each other to get ready and also to respond after a disaster, checking on each other, making sure that they can share some resources and skills, and also doing some communications among themselves. This is a somewhat of a response to Hurricane Katrina, where the emergency responders are traditionally well overtaxed and spread too thin. So neighbors helping neighbors is actually Vashon Be Prepared's motto. And the neighborhood emergency response team concept is, it's informal, it's not an official registered emergency worker thing, but the folks who can help each other because they live close by are more likely to be able to get there than a responder. So they'll be able to provide mutual aid. And that's been true during the pandemic as well. Is there anything else you want me to cover, Liz?
Evie, I believe Edgar Rivas has had his hand up several times.
Yes, he's next in our queue for question. Please, Eddie.
Thank you, Thomas. No, I was just going to reiterate some things. One, the importance of grassroots, how whatever the village does and decides really has to come from the local level. The people who are going to be in it have to be the ones making those decisions. We tried here in Montgomery County to start a village by going into a community that hadn't thought about it and giving them tools and helping them out, but it really didn't take. And so we had to just pull out and leave it alone. The other thing I wanted to add to the discussion about dues in the DC area, we have dues that range from no dues in an all volunteer village to one village in the city that charges close to $1,000 a year. Now, granted, part of that cost is they also have 4 FTEs, 4 full-time people working for them. I started a village in Virginia at one point that was subsidized by the Area Agency on Aging and a national organization. But when they pulled out the funding, I only lasted an extra year on community grants. And then we had to fold the village, even though I still participate pre-COVID on a monthly basis, going over 2 times a month to have lunch, play cards, hang out with the elders in the building. It was a vertical village. We were in an apartment complex. So money is an issue that you don't want to get hung up on if you have the volunteer workforce to get things done. That's all I wanted to add.
Thanks, Eddie. Vicky, back to you. Thank you.
Thanks. I just wanted to comment that on top of that Nero discussion, the Spring Beach and Gold Beach areas are, well, especially Gold Beach is actually what we call a super Nero. They have 25 discrete small groups that are part of a larger group that operates their own exercises for checking on each other and so on. They have classes in ham radio and so on. So there's already about 250 neighborhood groups on Vashon, which represents about almost half of the island households. And hoping that we can make sure and leverage all the existing strengths. I know there are more neighborhood groups that I'm not aware of just because they already exist. They don't need to report up to anyone. So, but it's a program that's been in existence for at least a decade. General Joe Ulatowski founded the program long before me, and I took it over in 2014. It's probably about 15 years old.
Thank you, Vicki. And did I see Bernie? Yes, please, Bernie.
Actually, goes back to Y2K, the initial concept.
Yeah.
And our neighborhood, Dilworth, has a pretty good connection among the 25 or so people that live here. But I did have a request, I guess because I'm fond of plagiarizing and I need some more grounding in this. I know what Neros are and certs and neighbor to neighbor. What I would like from, especially from the folks around the world and country here representing in this meeting, is some examples, maybe a half a dozen, people with websites, groups with websites, a village with a website, where I could go and tap in and see, gee, if I were going to join your group, what would I have to do? What would I have to offer? Blah, blah, blah. So some cheat sheets, as it were, from around the world for the several hundred organizations that are already out there. What are other people doing on the ground in the last, say, 5 or 10 years or more, but certainly it'd be at least 5 years old. It would really help me get some grounding on this because I'm struggling. Thank you.
I'll offer, if you go online and look up Washington Area Village Exchange, and then the acronym is WAVE, but just search Washington Area Village Exchange. You'll come up to the 60 odd villages in the DC metropolitan area, and you'll see a list of and websites for all those villages. And you can go and plagiarize to your heart's content.
No,
The same goes for Village Movement California. So it's another website that you can go to.
Thank you, Eddie and Barbara. And do I see Thomas? Thomas, you have your hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, just I guess a two-part question. One for, I guess it may be addressed a little more to Mr. I mean, it refers to something that Mr. Kenyon said, Peter Kenyon said, just that, you know, we've got this 2-year, or the senior center has got this 2-year grant for, as part of a 4-year grant cycle. What kind of stipulations does it have that it might, you know, increasingly shape what the villages can do or can't do? Or is that kind of mostly already laid out by the kind of diagrams that both Kathleen and Evie showed? And my second part of the question was that once you have businesses, you know, provide, like in Australia, providing discounts and part of that, how much of a tune do they call in terms of sponsorship and what they require, and how much of a presence do they get?
Tomas, I can answer that second part for you as far as what we're hoping for Vashon. In listening to the previous effort to get one of these villages going on Vashon, and just knowing that our business community may not be able to provide as much as, say, you know, something in an urban area, we are not planning on having any of that business component to it, where you get a discount for using a certain contractor or plumber or what have you. If the villages, after they get established, if that's something that they want to have, then absolutely, we're wide open for that. But right now, we're not planning on bringing in that aspect of some of the other villages. This is strictly going to be about members and people and volunteers.
Can I say, in
Anybody
Australia,
else?
just
Peter.
in terms of sponsorship in Australia, it's just good sponsorship. We just acknowledge people. There is no, you know, we certainly on all of our publicity. Make sure we acknowledge and say thank you. We put on an annual sponsors party where we invite people, and it's a social occasion where we can really just publicly say thank you. And we use any opportunity through the media to just acknowledge the support we're getting from our local businesses. Our Business Connect program kind of like also as a way of growing our sponsorship. Businesses get involved with us, and then they ask and they might join our simple silver, gold, platinum type membership way of going forward. But there's no there's nothing else besides good old saying thank yous and finding ways to do that. So in no way do those business sponsors control the hub, but it is a great way to connect the hub with our local business community, because certainly we are finding that that's one of the areas that our members really appreciate, is the support and the knowledge of a whole pile of businesses who care about them and will do the right thing by them. And we also just want to say, as I said, just find ways of acknowledging that generosity without any strings attached is probably how we function. Can I just finally say, and I've just got to go because I've got to go, believe it or not, it's almost 7 o'clock here now, and we're caught up in a program today. But one of the first things we ever did, and I'd really advocate this really strongly, is that we did an asset map of our community, and we did an asset map of all of our members as people join and whatever. Asset map of the community to discover who else is doing everything, because we have a strong principle, let's not duplicate. We have probably the largest learning centre in Western Australia is in the Hills. We will not run any learning programs. We divert all of our members into the learning programs. One, we have a very strong veteran seniors club. We have a very strong men's shed. We would never do men's shed type activities. We encourage our membership, and we have reciprocal arrangements and that type of thing. And we found that's really worked really well. We've made sure we don't threaten anyone else. We don't waste our energy duplicating what's already there. We want to leapfrog on what's there. And you only discover that by really doing a good, thorough community asset map. And then as people get involved, we discover what they care about, what are their gifts, what is it they could contribute to the hub or village. And that's been really useful. So I'd really encourage that. Asset mapping is a really important initial kind of like and an ongoing activity that I believe has paid off well and truly for us. And the final thing is keep it intergenerational. We're finding always, we have a thing called Tech and Tea on a Saturday morning, and it's young people coming and helping older people with their pads and their technology over a cup of tea. We've set up a repair cafe where people can bring things in to be repaired, and we've got people, young and old, who kind of like have become very much part of wanting to give to that type of thing. We got a group called Aging with Cycling, who are just younger people who love cycling and take out people, particularly people with dementia, out on one of these specially constructed bikes, just cycling. And their connection is the love of cycling. And so that whole intergenerational thing is a really important part. But I really wish you well, and thank you for the opportunity of being part of your launch. And I look forward to my next visit to Vashon as soon as this thing called COVID is over, and look forward to reconnecting with lots of friends there and people who've really helped me. Go well. Bye.
Thank
you,
you.
Peter.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Abby, I actually have to go also, but I wanted to tag on what Peter said. A lot of villages do the asset mapping, and there are some documents in our document library. You can search for them and see some examples. So feel free. Thank you all so much. It's I have grandchildren descending on me, so I have to go and batten down the hatches. So thank you all.
Bye, Barbara. Thank you so much. Bye,
Thank
Peter.
you.
All right. Thank you all. Y'all had great questions. I know sometimes it can be a bit confusing when we're talking about a village that's not actually a geographical building or place. When they first started this, they were calling them virtual villages, which with all the technology that has exploded since COVID, we thought that might be even more confusing. But Bernie, to your point, there are a lot of great examples out there of different villages. If you want to touch base with Evie or me, we can point you in the direction of some villages that are operating well. We welcome your questions, your ideas. Like we said, this is volunteer and member led. We're here to facilitate. And so I'm just very excited to see this many of you here today to get this movement launched on Vashon. And unless Evie, you have any other parting words for us?
I do not. Just thanks everyone for your time and your enthusiasm. It's lovely to have your curiosity as part of this discussion.
Thank you all.
Eddie, thank you so much for being on the
you.
panel. I said goodbye to
Thank you,
Barbara
everyone.
Sullivan and Barbara
Thank you,
Wells. Thank you
everybody.
so much for being our local panelists. Liz, note taking. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.